Do you ever feel lost in meetings, unsure of what to say or how to sound more professional? Whether you're leading a discussion, giving your opinion, or wrapping things up, using the right phrases can make all the difference. In this video, I'll give you 100 essential phrases to help you speak confidently in any meeting. Stay with me to level up your communication skills. Let's get started by looking at phrases you can use to start a meeting when everyone has arrived and you want to say something to signal that you're going to begin. Here are some things that you can say. Let's get started, shall we? This is a friendly way to start the meeting, and notice my intonation, the way that my voice goes up and down. Let's get started, shall we? Shall we begin? Another polite way to prompt the start of a meeting. This one's a little bit shorter, a bit more direct, but still polite. Before we start, does everyone have the agenda? The agenda is the list of items that you're planning to talk about in the meeting. Often this is given to people at the start, so a good way to begin the meeting is to check that everyone has it. Before we start, does everyone have the agenda? I'd like to welcome everyone. This is a formal but friendly way to greet everyone at the meeting. If you've just started and you want a friendly way to start, I'd like to welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Again, this is a polite way to begin a meeting by thanking people for their time. It shows appreciation for their attendance, and it could be used in a formal or informal setting. Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you all taking the time to be here. This is another way to thank people for their attendance. It's a little bit more formal and very polite. I appreciate you all taking the time to be here. I hope everyone is doing well today. This is a nice way to start because it creates a positive atmosphere. It's a nice thing to say before you get into the meeting and you get started with your agenda. Let's make this a productive session. This is a nice motivational thing you can say at the beginning of a meeting that encourages participation and encourages people to be productive in the meeting. Let's kick things off with, and then here you would introduce the first topic. For example, let's kick things off with the annual budget. If you kick things off, it means you begin, and it's often used at the start of a meeting. You could simply say, let's kick things off, to mean let's begin. Let's dive right in. This is another way to signal the start of a meeting, but without any kind of delay. You're going to dive right in, which means you'll get straight to the point, straight to the meeting agenda. Let's dive right in. Now you've started the meeting, you can move on to state the meeting's objective. This is where you tell everyone why you're there today, what the purpose of the meeting is, or what you're going to talk about. The purpose of today's meeting is, this is a very nice, clear, direct way to share what you're there for, what you're there to discuss. You could also say, today's main objective is to, again, you're using this phrase to state why you're there. The main objective, the main reason that you've come together in the meeting and what you hope to achieve. Our goal for this meeting is to, here you're outlining the intended outcome for the meeting, what you hope to achieve. Our goal for this meeting is it could be to decide something, to analyze something, to discuss something. Notice that with these phrases, we're using the infinitive. The purpose of today's meeting is to, the main objective today is to, our goal for this meeting is to. So after each of these phrases, you'll use the infinitive form of the verb with to. We're here to address, or you could say we're here to discuss, and then you can introduce your key discussion points. Today, we'll be focusing on, here you're drawing people's attention to the main focus, the main point of the meeting. The key issue we need to discuss is, this phrase is introducing your main priority, the key issue, the most important thing that you're going to talk about in that meeting. We're aiming to achieve, by using the word achieve, you're talking about your goals for the meeting, what you want the desired result to be. We need to find a solution for, here you are highlighting a problem that you need to discuss. Maybe that's the purpose of your meeting. You've come together to talk about an issue and find a solution. We need to find a solution for, and then say what that problem is. By the end of this meeting, we should have, and here you're going to use the past participle of the verb. We should have decided, we should have discussed, we should have planned. So this is, again, your desired outcome, what you want to achieve in that meeting. Let's clarify what we need to accomplish today. This helps to ensure a clear purpose, make sure that everyone is on the same track and they understand why they're there. Let's clarify what we need to accomplish today, meaning let's talk about why we're here and what we hope to do in this meeting. Now you've stated the objectives of the meeting, you might want to use some phrases to introduce topics. Here are some things that you can say. Moving on to our first point. Or if it's not the first point, you could say moving on to our next point. Or if it's the last point, moving on to our final point. The next item on the agenda is, this is something you can say if you have a meeting agenda and you're working through it in order. You finish one point, you want to move on to the next one, you can say, the next item on the agenda is, I'd like to bring up. Bring up is a phrasal verb which just means to start talking about a topic. For example, I'd like to bring up the issue we had last week with the sales report. You're bringing up a topic, meaning you're starting to talk about it. Let's turn our attention to. If you turn your attention to something, it means everyone focuses on a new point. You could use this if you want to redirect everyone's attention to something specific, maybe something that's already on the agenda. I'd like to highlight. This is similar to saying I'd like to bring up, but it's usually used if you want to emphasize something. To highlight means to emphasize. So it's very useful if you want to talk about an important point. I'd like to highlight. Another important issue to discuss is, so this phrase is used to introduce, again, a new point, something else that you want to talk about in the meeting. It could be if you're introducing an additional point to something that someone's already said, or introduce a new key point. We need to address. If you say we need to address something, it usually signals that there's an urgent or very important matter. We need to address this, which means we really need to talk about this now, or we need to sort out this problem urgently. Before we continue, let's review. So this could be quite a useful way of making sure everyone understands, or there is clarity on what you've just talked about. So before continuing to the next point, let's review what we've already talked about. Has everyone had a chance to look at, again, this is a phrase you might use if there's an agenda and you want to move on to talk about something on the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at this point? And then everyone will turn their attention to that point and you can begin to discuss it. It's also checking to see how informed everyone in the meeting is before you discuss a topic. Let's circle back to. If you circle back to something, it means you want to revisit a point that you already talked about. You might talk about something at the beginning and say, let's circle back to that later. Meaning we'll come back to that, we'll talk about it later in the meeting. When you want to then revisit that point, you can say, let's circle back to that thing we discussed at the beginning of the meeting, meaning you want to bring it up again for further discussion. Another thing you will probably have to do in meetings is give your opinion. Here are some phrases that you can use to do that. In my opinion. This is a nice, clear way of expressing a personal opinion, what you think. It's a more formal way of saying, I think. In my opinion, I strongly believe that. By using the word strongly, we're indicating that we have a very firm belief. We don't just believe something, we strongly believe it. This can be used if you want to give a strong opinion. From my perspective, this is like saying, in my opinion, but can be used if you want to give your own personal view on something, Maybe you have a viewpoint or a perspective that's different to other people. From my perspective, I'd say that if you use this phrase, you're still offering your opinion, but it's slightly softer. It's not quite as strong as saying, I strongly believe, or in my opinion. You can soften it a bit by saying, I'd say that it seems to me that. This is another way to give your opinion without sounding too forceful. You're saying what you think, but in a softer way. As far as I'm concerned, this is another way to say, in my opinion, or I think, to state your own personal belief. It's a little bit stronger than the previous one, but it's still polite and diplomatic. As far as I'm concerned, I'd like to add that this is a way of adding your input to a discussion. If people are talking about something and you want to interrupt with your opinion, I'd like to add that my take on this is, if you say my take on this, you're basically saying my opinion or the way that I see this. So again, giving your own personal opinion. This one isn't too forceful or too strong. You're just saying what you think from your perspective. My take on this is, I think we should consider. This is a useful one if you want to propose an idea or contribute your own idea to a discussion. I think we should consider, and then say what your idea is. And the final one in this category, to my mind, this is like saying from my perspective or in my opinion. Again, you're telling people what you think. To my mind. Now, as well as giving your own opinion, you might also want to agree with other people in the meeting or support their ideas. Here are some things that you can say. I completely agree. This one is good if you want to express your full agreement. You really agree with someone. I completely agree. And notice how we stress the word completely to emphasize our agreement. That's a great point. This is a nice one to say to acknowledge a good idea that someone gives. Someone else in the meeting says something that you'd like to agree with. That's a great point. I'm on the same page. If you're on the same page as someone, it means that you agree with them. You are aligned. You have the same ideas. I couldn't agree more. This is like saying I completely agree, but even stronger. You're expressing your complete and total agreement. I couldn't agree more. You're absolutely right. With this one, using the word absolutely, again, we're emphasizing that we agree with this person and showing strong alignment with their ideas. You could simply say, you're right, or if you want to show that you strongly agree, you can say, you're absolutely right. And again, we stress that word, absolutely, to emphasize our agreement. That makes a lot of sense. This is a nice thing to say if you want to validate someone's idea or validate their argument. You can nod your head and say yes. That makes a lot of sense. I fully support this. Now, you could simply say, I support this, to show that you agree with someone's idea or they have your backing. Or if you want to add some emphasis, you can use the word fully. And don't forget to stress that word. I fully support this. I see your point. Now, this one isn't necessarily agreeing with someone, but it does acknowledge their view. It's showing them that you see that they have a valid idea. They've said something that makes sense. I see your point. I think you're onto something. This is a nice way to recognize a valuable idea that someone contributed to the meeting. You think that they've got the right idea, they're making a lot of sense. Perhaps they've thought of something creative or innovative. You can say, I think you're onto something. And finally, to agree, we can say, that's exactly what I was thinking. This shows again that you are aligned with what that person has said. You have the same ideas, the same opinion, and you completely agree. That's exactly what I was thinking. And with this one, we are stressing the word exactly. If you're enjoying this video and finding these phrases useful, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more English language learning content. Thank you so much, everyone. And now let's get back to our phrases. Now, as well as agreeing with other people and giving your opinion, there might be times when you want to disagree. But usually, when you're in a meeting, you want to disagree politely. So, here are some things that you can say. I see your point, but here we can soften our disagreement by acknowledging that the other person maybe has a good idea, but we use that word but to introduce our contrasting opinion. I see your point, but, and then you introduce what your idea is. I'm afraid I have to disagree. This is a polite way to disagree because we've used that phrase, I'm afraid. This is a great way to soften disagreement in meetings. Instead of just saying, I disagree, which can sound quite direct, if you want to sound more polite, I'm afraid I have to disagree. That's an interesting perspective, but this is like saying, I see your point, but we are respecting the person's view by saying their perspective is interesting. Then we use the word but to introduce our conflicting opinion. I see things a little differently. So here again, a polite way to introduce that our opinion is different to the other person, but it's quite a soft, diplomatic way of doing that. I see things a little differently. I'm not sure that's the best approach. This is a good one if someone has given an idea about how to do something, but you don't agree. And again, you want to disagree politely. By saying, I'm not sure, you're softening it slightly. Basically, what you're saying is, I don't think that's a good idea. But can you see how this phrase is much more polite? I'm not sure that's the best approach. We're disagreeing politely. I'd have to question that. If you question something, you're challenging someone's idea. And by using that phrase, I'd have to, you're not outright saying, I disagree, or I don't think that's a good idea. You say, okay, I'd have to question that idea, meaning I have some doubts about this. I don't quite agree with that. This shows mild disagreement. Again, instead of saying, I don't agree with that, which is quite direct, you can introduce it with this word quite, and that softens your disagreement. I don't quite agree with that. I understand your concern, but now this again is like saying, I see your point, but we're acknowledging that someone has a concern, they are not sure about something. Then we use the word but to introduce our conflicting opinion. I understand your concern, but I think, and then go on to disagree. Let's consider an alternative view. This is a good one if you want to redirect people to another perspective. Maybe you're in a meeting where everyone's discussing something that you feel just isn't working, and you want to politely but firmly move people in a different direction. Let's consider an alternative view. And the final way you can disagree with people in a meeting is to say, I'm not entirely convinced. Another way to soften using the word entirely. Instead of saying, I'm not convinced, you could say, I'm not entirely convinced, meaning you've got some reservations about the idea. The next thing you might want to do in a meeting is ask for clarification. If someone says something that you don't completely understand or you feel isn't very clear, here are some things that you can say. Could you elaborate on that? This is requesting more detail. If someone's given you an idea or they've talked about something, but there's not enough details for you to understand, you can ask them to elaborate. Make sure you use it with the preposition on. Can you elaborate on that? Or you could simply say, can you elaborate? Can you clarify what you mean? Or to be more specific, can you clarify what you mean by, and then you can bring up the specific point that you didn't quite understand. Could you give us an example? This is a good one if someone has said something, but you don't really see how it could work in practice. Asking for an example is a great way to clarify their idea. What exactly do you mean by? Again, this can be used to request specific details or asking someone to clarify a specific point that you didn't understand. What exactly do you mean by? And then you can say whatever it was that they said that you don't understand. Just to confirm, are you saying that, So here you're going to paraphrase what the person just said, meaning to put what they said into your own words to check that you understand. This can be a great way to make sure you understand people in a meeting. Could you break that down for me? This can be good if you want a step-by-step explanation. If someone has talked about a process of doing something and you want it to be simplified, you can ask them to break it down. Could you rephrase that? Here you're asking someone to give you the same idea but use different words. They're going to paraphrase what they said to help you better understand. Do you mean that? Again, this is another way of checking that you've understood by just repeating what someone said, but using your own words. So do you mean that? You'll say it in your own words, and then you can check that that's what they mean. Let me make sure I understand you correctly. This is another one where you would then summarize what you understand from the other person. This is a really nice, polite phrase to use to make sure that you understand someone before moving on or ending the meeting. And finally, you could say, so are you suggesting that? Here you would take someone's idea, rephrase it, and check that that's actually what they mean. So are you suggesting that? Speaking of suggesting, we're going to move on to the next category of phrases which can be used when you want to make suggestions in a meeting. How about this is quite a casual way of making a suggestion. After this phrase, you're going to use the simple form of the verb. For example, how about we try, or how about we go, or how about we look at? What if we tried? So this could be a good phrase to introduce an alternative approach. And with this phrase, you're going to use the ing form. What if we tried making, or what if we tried going, or what if we tried doing? I suggest that here you're going to put forward a recommendation or an idea, and you're going to use the simple form of the verb. I suggest we go, or I suggest we do, I suggest we try. A possible solution could be, this is a good one if you are discussing a problem and trying to come up with ideas to solve the problem. You could introduce your idea by saying, a possible solution could be, have we considered, here you're opening up the conversation to explore alternative ideas or other approaches. Have we considered this, or have we considered doing this? Why don't we? This is the same as how about we, perhaps a little less casual, and again, you're using the simple form of the verb. Why don't we do? Why don't we go? Why don't we try? We might want to look into, if you look into something, you investigate it. So perhaps if you are suggesting ideas that you want to investigate a little bit further to see if they could work, is a really great way of opening up the discussion for further investigations. One option could be, here if you're brainstorming ideas or proposing solutions to problems, you're presenting a potential solution. One option could be, another approach would be, here you're offering an alternative method, alternative way of doing something. Another approach would be, let's explore the idea of, with this phrase, you're encouraging discussion on a concept. You have an idea and you want people to talk about it further or investigate it further. Let's explore the idea of. After you've given your ideas, you might want to use some phrases to ask for input, ask for opinions from other people in the meeting. What are your thoughts on this? Here you are inviting the other person or other people to give you their opinion. What are your thoughts on this? Does anyone have any suggestions? Here you are opening up the floor to ideas, inviting people to give you their suggestions or presenting ideas to solve a problem. How do you feel about this? Here you're asking for personal viewpoints, for personal opinions about what people think regarding your idea. How do you feel about this? What's your take on this? Remember, if you're talking about your take, it's your opinion, your viewpoint, your perspective. You're asking someone to give you their idea. What's your take on this? Does anyone see it differently? This is something you might say after you've given an opinion or decided on something, but you want to invite people to give conflicting opinions or invite a diverse range of ideas. I'd love to hear your perspective. Here you are welcoming other people's insights. By saying, I'd love to hear your perspective, you're showing that you are very open to other people's ideas. Any feedback on this? This is something you might say if you want to ask for people's comments. Perhaps you've just run a project, you've done a trial of something, you want to ask for people's feedback. Any feedback on this? Do you have any concerns? Here you are inviting people to let you know if they have any objections to an idea or a proposal. Do you have any concerns, or does anyone have any concerns? Can we get everyone's input on this? This is a useful thing to say if you want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. Sometimes in the meeting, people stay quiet. Maybe they don't feel confident giving their ideas. If you say, can we get everyone's input on this? You're encouraging everyone in the meeting to participate and give their ideas and opinions. Let's open the floor to discussion. If you open the floor, you're inviting anyone in the meeting to speak, and you're encouraging group discussion and sharing of ideas and opinions. Finally, you've had a hopefully productive meeting. Now here are some things you can say at the end, some ways to close or finish the meeting. To sum up, we've decided this is something you might say when you want to do a quick summary of what you've talked about or what you've decided in the meeting before you end. Let's quickly recap today's discussion. If you recap something, you review it, you go over it again. So this is a good way to end the meeting because you can go through all the key points before finishing. Before we wrap up, does anyone have any final comments? To wrap up means to finish something. And by asking if anyone has any final comments, you're inviting people to say any last things they want to say before the meeting ends. Our next steps will be, this is to outline future actions that you will take, often useful to do at the end of a meeting so that you have a list of your action points. Let's set a deadline if you set a deadline for something, you're saying the day that you need to complete something by. This helps to establish a time frame to achieve everything that you've talked about doing in the meeting. We'll follow up on this in our next meeting. By saying this, you are planning for or scheduling further discussion or follow-up, meaning to talk about the progress of how something's doing in your next meeting. Let's ensure we stay on track with our action points. This is something you could say if you want to emphasize the importance of accountability, making sure that everyone completes the tasks that have been agreed on in the meeting. Thank you all for your time and input. Again, we're showing appreciation for people being there and contributing their ideas during the meeting. I appreciate everyone's contributions today. This is another way of acknowledging everyone's participation. And the very last thing you can say, that concludes our meeting for today. By saying this, you are officially ending the meeting. So that concludes our video for today. How did you get on? Let me know your favorite phrases in the comments down below. You now have 100 phrases to use for your next meeting. But if you want to sound really natural at work, you should also learn some business-related idioms and phrases. To learn some right now, I recommend that you watch this video next.